go. What's up, everybody's? John TheMorgile here, checking in for a live stream with you. Hope y'all are having a wonderful, beautiful, lovely day. Go on and give us some thumbs up in the chat if you can hear me loud and clear, and if you're having a grand old time there. Don't forget to show us some love for the algorithm. Thank you. So yeah, man, a few things. Oh, let me get past this initial hiccup here. Few things I wanted to run by you guys, share with you guys. So I'll give everyone a chance to pile in before I actually get started with it. And by pile in, I mean everybody leave at once. Why don't you? No, I guess it's probably the dang advertisements, as they say. So yeah, there you go. Everybody's back. Thank you, thank you. So yeah, man, a few things. I guess I'll just get right to it. Hello, Alex PM. Hey, to you too, my friend. Prayers go up for Palestine, man. Got to start off every stream with that. Prayers go up for Lahaina. And just prayers go up, man. So much injustice and strife and tumult in the world. It does tend to put your problems in perspective. But in any case, I'm basically screwed. But you know me. Not as bad as the Palestinians have it, is my point. That was the point of what I was saying, for sure. So yeah, man. So a couple things. So the next video I'm coming out with is going to be, and I'm getting done with it. It'll be out this week for sure. We're getting into the whole mud flood thing, and I'm focusing for the first time ever on Australia in general, which has proven to be very interesting. And specifically for this video, we're gonna touch on Sydney. And you know, there's others we could choose from in Australia, but one thing I was surprised to learn is basically, from what I can tell, Australia is the only continent where you're not gonna find the star forts, which I find very interesting. The other thing that kind of raised an eyebrow with me and really sort of dropped my jaw a bit, and y'all tell me what you think, but I was kind of surprised to learn that Australia was, you know, discovered by Western European civilization after, like, way after America. What's up, Bear Pale Coffee? Sorry if I butchered your name. What's up, man? But you know, the thing with Australia though is, God, it's so similar. That there are so many striking similarities between, so we'll say like Sydney, Australia, and say Chicago, Illinois. From even like the timelines, like this was all happening basically at the same time, more or less. It's like, what happened? What happened here, man? What happened on this world? I think that's like the big question about the whole mud flood thing. And I've got tons of pictures that are going to go up on the you know, the video or whatever. And like my computer's such a piece of crap here. That's why I don't do like an OBS stream where I can share my screen with you and show you things, just because I mean, I could probably do it, but this computer would probably screw it up. I might try to do it once on this, but I think I have before and it wasn't pretty. So, but anyway, it'll all be in the video. And there's just so much similar in terms of the architecture, the engineering, the timeline. I mean, some of the buildings in Sydney look like they could have been built by like the same dudes that put up a lot of the buildings in Chicago. And I think where my suspicion is leaning towards, and I think everybody else probably has already come to terms with this way ahead of me, but like it appears that we're dealing with this worldwide civilization that was everywhere. And at some point within like even the last 300 years or so, as recently as that, something happened. And for whatever reason, the people that were in charge of sort of handing down the historical narrative ultimately wanted us deceived about who these people were and what exactly happened to them. And it was funny, like there's a couple of quotes that we'll touch on, and I'll tell you who said this stuff in the video, but there was people that like grew up in Australia and didn't learn anything about the native indigenous people. Like it wasn't taught in any of the schools, and there was basically no historical records kept of the Aborigines. They didn't even start doing that until like, I want to say the 1960s or something like that. And like the Aborigine people didn't have the right to vote until about that time as well. So very sort of archaic situation in Australia, but like you find the same asylums being put up in the 1800s allegedly as well. And then these massive, exquisite, just gorgeous post offices allegedly being slapped up in like a year or two, according to the narrative, just like we see all over the US. And so the similarities between Australia and the US was striking. But, if Australia was discovered by Europeans over 100 years after America was discovered, then why do they call America the new land? Like, I don't get it. Shouldn't Australia technically be the new land? I don't know. And we all know the shtick about the prison colonies. But what a lot of people don't know is that Britain was actually shipping prisoners off to to America, allegedly, according to the official history, right up to the point into the Revolutionary War, I want to say, is what the shtick is. And that's when they started, it was like I forget the exact years, but at some point very recently is when they started doing the whole prison colony thing in Australia. So, the narrative is just very strange, and it's very strange how similar these cities went up. Like, so I guess what I'm saying is the way that a bunch of prisoner, maybe one or two generations removed from this prisoner penal colonies or whatever, they're slapping up police stations, post offices, asylums, orphanages, just exactly like they were doing overseas in America at about the same time, just by happenstance, just by sort of sheer chance. And, honestly, in my opinion, it makes a lot more sense that all of these, well, not all of the infrastructure, but the vast majority of the city infrastructure, the buildings, the works, the bridges, the tunnels, that sort of thing, was already in place when the settlers or the pioneers or the colonialists or whatever, the colonists, when they arrived, they just ended up taking credit for building all that stuff, which is why they brand the native populations as basically troglodyte savages running around naked in the woods with feathers in their hats. Don't own a pair of pants among the lot of them. Savages, unreasonable. So they sort of have to tell everybody that that's how these people were, so that they can just take credit for building these cities, which frankly, they didn't have time. They didn't have time in the official historical narrative to turn these basically allegedly middle of nowhere places with nothing into these sprawling metropolises of cities with underground tunnels and bridges and infrastructure. And by the way, Sydney's no exception when it comes to the underground as well. So I've got like a bunch of footage from the underground. With them being a sort of Western, they didn't go the crypt route with it. You know, we do see the crypts a lot. Apparently, Sydney wasn't filled with dead men's bones, but it is just as strange that, you know, they will claim that these underground infrastructures, these subterranean miles and miles of tunnels under these cities, were sort of constructed as an afterthought. Yet in so many cases, it makes a lot more sense that that stuff was extant. It was already there, and then at some point flooded over. And so like the ground level raised, and then they just sort of adapt to the new ground level being, you know, 5 or 10 feet higher than it was before. That would make a lot more sense, but no, they don't claim that. Like, it's just so bizarre that the same sort of, the same flavor of lies are used, the same designations in terms of the, like, so the post office is an example that I love to point to, because, I mean, look at it in modern days. If you've ever seen them put up a new post office for like a town, they put up a little generic building that's just as functional as it needs to be. So it's not like they're going to make some exquisite, grandiose Gothic cathedral for a post office for a town of a few thousand people. That's in modern times. We just don't do that. But allegedly in the early 1800s, when these people supposedly didn't have any sort of power tools that we take for granted, no supply lines, no Home Depot, no labor unions, no bulldozers, didn't have anything, these people would just decide to build these grandiose Gothic, basically cathedrals, for purposes like post offices, or purposes like insane asylums, or you know, there's so many examples of these things, police stations. But the fact that these so-called prison colonies in Australia did it identically to the way that they were doing it in America is very strange. And, you know, when you're dealing with Europe, okay, they have this sort of luxury of thousands of years and thousands of slaves. And then, of course, the divine sort of authority of the kings, right? So, like, if you're in Europe and you find these buried megalithic structures, they can just say, oh, well, it was thousands of years ago because they had thousands of slaves and it took them God knows how long to build it. And then, of course, they also had King fill in the blank to take credit for it. Even though, you know, we all know the kings never actually pick up a hammer a day in their life, but they get credit for building all these things, however that works. But you can't get away with that narrative in America or in Australia, because according to the very narrative that they've sort of painted themselves into the corner with, you've got these naked savages running around in the woods with, you know, with the feathers in their hats, as recently as just a few hundred years ago. And when they allegedly, you know, when the colonies originally arrived there, allegedly, they spent over like 100 years fighting off the natives. So it's like you can't really go about building grandiose structures in an area where there's people trying to kill you. Like, that doesn't exactly make for good, productive work environment. You know what I mean? What's up, YouTube? So, you know, it's just, it was just very strange because, you know, guilty. I've never looked too much into Australian history. I guess my favorite thing about Australia is probably Jim Jeffries. I don't know much about Australia. And I was very surprised to learn how recently Australia was founded. And it makes a lot of sense to me that Australia is just another example of evidence for this lost or covered up ancient civilization that's was worldwide, that was highly technologically advanced, that was responsible probably for everything ranging from like the Great Pyramids all the way to the other megalithic structures, and then even these giant undertakings in terms of infrastructure, like civil engineering projects that the ancients were doing. By the way, there are giant pyramids, ancient giant pyramids in Australia as well, several of them. So it does check off that box, which is kind of surprising. Like when you think of Australia and savage aboriginals running around in the woods naked with feathers in their hats, you don't necessarily equate those sorts of people with building pyramids, right? But in fact, it appears that's exactly what happened. So I think this is going to be a good video. I'm just kind of covering some of the stuff that really struck me as very interesting. So I'm glad a couple people had suggested to look into Australia, and I had been thinking about it. So I think there's a lot of pay dirt to be had in Australia in terms of the whole stolen history school of thought. It just puts the context of history into such a more sensible perspective. And I remember just a few years ago, before sort of being more discerning as we tend to be of late. But my wife and I would talk about it all the time, about how like we couldn't understand how these ancient Roman cities were built like on top of extant older Roman cities, or maybe some other older civilization cities, but just building stuff right on top of the old stuff. And we never could understand like how in the hell, like first of all, why and how, but then when you juxtapose that with a great flood where the street levels are literally raised basically overnight, it makes a lot of sense why they would then raise the street levels and have to build on top of that. And when we see evidence for that sort of thing in America and Australia, for the same sorts of buildings that a lot of them appear to be like Greco-Roman and stuff like that, even in America and Australia, it raises an eyebrow. And so, because, supposedly there's hundreds or even thousands of years and oceans separating these places, there shouldn't be any sort of connection or similar timeline in the history of America and Australia and these older ancient European areas where the Greeks and the Romans and stuff had their druthers. So when you look at all of this evidence now through this new lens, through this sort of hypothesis that history has got it wrong, like the entire basically paradigm that we have about how history has unraveled and unfolded to lead us to where we stand today, a lot of that is wrong, like way wrong, and for a myriad, variety of reasons. Not only is it wrong because, well, of course, history is written by the winners of wars, and by definition, you win wars with deception. Okay, so the people that are good at winning wars happen to be good at deceiving. So it's really no surprise in that sense that you have this sort of deliberate, like I would say, euphemisms being used in historical context, but euphemism doesn't even quite get it, right? Because you've got the winners of wars redacting history and replacing themselves into that narrative to smell like a rose. So you can't trust a lot of what was written in history as historical fact because of that. but then you have other sort of mundane reasons as well. But I think the main one is that it was to cover up the existence of this ancient worldwide civilization that appears to have been using free energy capabilities the entire time. And you know, I think that people like Nikola Tesla figured out how they were doing it and wanted to roll that out again freely to the world. And, you know, the likes of J.P. Morgan and Thomas Edison wouldn't allow it. So it's a damn shame. Right. So the main thing, we'll move on from Australia for now. I just wanted to bring some of that stuff up because I just found myself absolutely fascinated with it. And just wanted to give you guys a bit of a sort of teaser as to what the new video, the one that's coming out this week, will be like. So just heads up on that. God willing, I'll have that out before the weekend. So the main thing that I wanted to talk about, and boy, is this unfortunate, but I got to talk about it. So, okay, so most of you guys know the channel Beyond the Imaginary Curve with our Scottish brother, Del. If you guys aren't familiar, it's another FLERFER channel that's been around since, you know, early on, 2014, 2015 probably. Del's been putting out FLERFER videos for a long time. So he's definitely one of the originals. But of late, that channel and then also sort of a cult following of Del's has gotten into territory of the not so stationary upward moving Earth. Okay. And honestly, I can't even. V. Thomas Del doesn't claim flat. Okay. All right. So whatever. So that's beyond the scope of this video, but okay, fine. He doesn't claim flat. Oh, I didn't know that. I assumed that he did. Anyway, and again, so I can't even believe that I'm saying this sort of thing out loud. We're all familiar with the Flat Earth Society, right? The sort of controlled opposition Flat Earth Society that for the entire time that I've been doing this, I knew that they had claimed, you know, so objects fall, what goes up must come down, gravity, relative density, disequilibrium, if you will. The reason that things fall is definitely hotly debated, right? So the Globbers claim that it's Einsteinian gravity. The FLERFERS claim that it's relative density. And then, of course, you've got Flat Earth Society claiming that, no, it's the Earth rising upwards. So it's the flat Earth rising upwards at 9.8 meters per second. Not at an acceleration, but at a steady 9.8 meters per second. And actually, I think the Flat Earth Society did claim that it was an acceleration. So like 9.8 meters per second squared. Okay. Now, the main piece of evidence that Del and his followers, disciples, I don't know what you'd call them, but the people that are with him on this, the main piece of evidence it seems that they're using is, so the fact and the reason that the water bottle's on the thumbnail of this video. So, okay, if you take a water bottle, you know, half full of water and put the lid on it and then drop it, let it free fall. If you pay close attention to it, the water, so let me back this up. So if you take that same bottle half filled with water and lay it on the table and then slide it this way, what's going to happen is the liquid's going to go towards the rear of the direction of travel, you know, towards the source of the acceleration, and the gas is going to go, you know, default to the front, so the opposite of that. And so that in that sense, a water bottle filled with, you know, half filled with water is kind of an accelerometer in a way. But what they're observing is when you take that same bottle of water and drop it, that none of that actually happens. So and I should probably cut in a video right here that shows you what they're talking about, but I don't have that ability right now. It'll be in a video that I'm gonna have to, finish on this, but let me just explain it to you, okay? You can use your imagination and look up the videos yourself. But so if you take like a spirit level, just a regular job site level, a spirit level, with the little tube of liquid and the bubble that floats in between the two lines, if you take that and lay it on the table and then move it, you'll notice that the same thing occurs with the liquid in the tube and the gas. So like the liquid will want to, basically the liquid tends to stand still, according to the laws of inertia. So it will apparently move towards the back of the tube that it's housed in. And because of that, it will displace the air to move towards the front of the tube, right? And anytime you accelerate enclosed liquid in any direction, what they're saying is it does that, okay? Except when you drop the bottle and let it free fall, since none of that happens, what their claim is, therefore the Earth is rising up at 9.8 meters per second, not at an acceleration, but at a consistent speed. That's what they're claiming. And so, like, my first knee-jerk reaction was, I thought it was ridiculous. And of course, everybody knows, well, now everybody knows that the Earth is stationary. And so I definitely noticed that, okay, we don't want to get into the same mindset that we were in believing in the ball, right? Everybody knows the Earth's a spinning ball. And so we don't investigate other avenues, right? And so in that spirit, I decided to investigate this avenue based on what these guys are saying. They do have other points of evidence that they point to support their claim. But I got to thinking about it, and I'm trying to see maybe they do have a point, because it does appear when you drop the water bottle, the liquid falls and it doesn't displace, but when you move it across the table, it does. But, I got to thinking about it, and it just came to me, you're dealing with two different inertial frames, okay? So when you move the spirit level across the table, or if you move the bottle of water across the table, the liquid inside wants to remain inert. It wants to stand still per the laws of motion. And so when you move the bottle, it's only the contact edges of that container that are going to push the water along, right? Whereas if you drop the bottle, the water is going to fall at the exact same rate as the container. And so you don't have this sort of pressure of the walls of the container causing the liquid to move. The liquid is going to innately move due to the downward vector that affects all objects and liquids, not gases, but objects and liquids. And so when you drop the bottle, you're dealing with a non-inertial frame. And when you push the bottle across the table, you're dealing with an inertial frame. And that is why the two behave differently. So the reason that the water doesn't rise to the top of the bottle when you drop it and the gases move to the bottom, as they are saying should happen. So you should have this displacement of the liquid in the bottle as it's dropped, but you don't see that. And the reason that they're saying that happens is because the bottle and the water within it is actually standing still, and it's the Earth that's racing up along with the gases above the Earth that's racing up to eventually meet the bottle when it lands, okay? That's what they're claiming is happening. And first of all, just from basic experience, I believe we all sort of inherently know that that's wrong. At least that's the way I see it. But it's not just a knee-jerk reaction. Like, I've thought about this in great detail, and it makes perfect sense to me why the dropped bottle doesn't have displacement and the nudged bottle does. Now, I think we can definitely argue and debate and constructively, try to figure out what is the cause of this downward vector that affects all objects and liquids, but not gases? We can debate about the causes of this, call it gravity, call it relative density disequilibrium, call it what goes up must come down. I think we can argue and debate what the cause is, but I don't think we can really necessarily argue and debate that it's actually occurring, okay? And again, what I'll go to is always go back to my own personal experiences. And I know that when I've jumped off of high dives or jumped off of tall trees into rivers, which I've done hundreds of times for sure, between the high dives and just being out on the rivers a lot. When you jump off of a tall object into the water, you're falling. You damn sure know you're falling. There isn't a doubt in my mind that, so what they're saying is, you're standing still while the water is racing up to hit you in the ass. And they're basing this on the evidence of, so basically they're treating the bottle of water being dropped like an accelerometer. They're saying that there is no acceleration detected in the water and gas within the enclosed water bottle. Therefore, there's your proof that it's stationary. If you compare that to a water bottle nudged across the table, it's going to have displacement of the water showing you that it's being accelerated, okay? But again, you're dealing with two entirely different inertial frames. When you're pushing the bottle across the table, the water wants to stand still due to its inertia, but it's forced across the table, and so it's going to wishy-wash around, and the gas is going to displace opposite of that, because gas really wouldn't be affected other than by just the edges of that system, or the edges of the container, right? But when you're dealing with dropping it, the liquid in the bottle is going to fall due to the downward vector at the same speed as the container. And so you wouldn't expect that displacement of the fluid because the fluid is compelled to drop at 9.8 meters per second squared, just as the container is. And because it's a closed off system, there's not going to be any sort of, aerodynamic issues causing the water to want to slosh around or whatever. If you take the lid off of the bottle, it definitely will slosh around. Now, I think it's kind of silly that this is being argued to the degree that it's being argued. I mean, these guys are basically calling perfectly legitimate fellow FLERFERS brainwashed fools for not agreeing with them on this. And man, I've been looking into this for the last 3 weeks and thinking about this in depth. And, maybe at first I thought that they had the potential to maybe be onto something. And so I did look into it, but it's really, in my opinion, man, they're wrong. Okay. You've got two different inertial frames in these two different exercises, if you will. And what they're saying is that the only thing that could explain this observation is the Earth racing up at 9.8 meters per second. They're saying that's the only thing that can explain this observation. But what I'm saying is no, that's not the only thing. And in fact, the very simple, obvious thing that could explain it is the fact that it is a different type of inertial frame. One's inertial, one's non-inertial reference frame. And so there's absolutely no reason, in my opinion, to get bent out of shape about this. But the fact that we have to now put ourselves into camps based on this, I think it's quite absurd. Like, I don't understand why somebody would want to die on this particular hill and put a stake in the sand, and anybody who's with either you're with us or against us on this, because it is so wrong. I mean, I hate to say it, but it is obviously wrong. It's something, the earth is measurably stationary. So in fairness, the other thing that they're saying is that, and I'm not making this claim, this is a claim that they're making. I've never seen this, and I'll assume that they're telling the truth. They're not lying about this, I'm sure. But what they're saying is if you set your phone on a table and check your accelerometer specs or whatever, the accelerometer in your phone will say that it is 9.8 meters per second squared. And if you drop the phone into free fall and check the accelerometer reports during that free fall time, it will say that it is stationary during that free fall, not accelerating. And so they're going to point to that. And now these are digital accelerometers, okay? And my response to that is, I don't know how the underlying firmware or software that's running that accelerometer works, but I do know the sort of lengths that the Globbers go to in these sort of digital products in order to make it appear as if their scientism religion is correct. So, like, for example, with the ring laser gyros, you'll see the 15 degree per hour rotation of the ether, which is mistaken for the 15 degree per hour rotation of the earth. But it is merely the sort of the matrix of reality, the ether. And I know ether is a loaded term, but I don't mean it in the way that many people mean it. But at any rate, this ring laser gyro software is like trade secret. It's closed source, so it's not like open source software. It's closed source, secret software that nobody really knows what's going on with it. But the point is, though, if you use a regular mechanical gyroscope, there is no measured 15 degree per hour drift. There is this precession that only exists with the ring laser gyros appears to be something that's coded into the software. And so I would say something similar appears to be going on with these accelerometers. Because again, I'm going to trust my own internal inert accelerometers more than I'm going to trust the software that was built in order to reinforce the gravitational constant. So you know how the Globbers say that gravity isn't a force, but it's an acceleration? Yeah, so what these accelerometers are going to tell you is they're calibrated in such a way that when it's sitting there on a table, it's picking up this gravitational constant, this 9.8 meters per second squared when standing still, because the acceleration of gravity is acting on it. But when you drop it in free fall and it's actually falling at 9.8 meters per second squared, then it reads as if it's stationary. Again, it's just the way they've got it calibrated, I'm sure. Because again, like, let's face it, I know for a fact when you jump off of a high dive, you're falling. You feel it in your gut. You feel it in your bones. You know you're falling. Never done it in a vacuum chamber, so that would probably be the best way to do it, but I don't know anyone who has. I'm willing to bet you would even still feel like you're falling. The claim that Earth is rising up at 9.8 meters per second is, in my opinion, very bizarre. It's been debunked in many other ways than the things that I've mentioned here, by the fact that the Earth is stationary. Like, I'm here to tell you, there would be other indicators, in my opinion, that we're rising up at 9.8 meters per second. And like, what about the question, like, so if you drop something, what causes it to accelerate? And like, again, we can argue what causes the downward vector. We can argue all kinds of things, but I just don't think it's productive to argue that we do not have this downward vector for physical objects, not gases, or else you're a shill. Like, if you don't agree with me on this, you're a shill. I think that's crazy. Like, the FLERFER community is already sort of small and divided enough without, driving wedges between our little camps. I mean, I think that's very unwise, and it's happening left to right. Like, I try not to get involved in the drama, but whatever, a lot of good it does me. But, man, I just think that this one here, it's just not worth it. Like, I'm not going to do a full video on this point because it is so absurd, but it's like, what sort of message does this send to the world? Like, if FLERFERS can be so absolutely wrong about something like this and disagree on something so simple as whether or not the Earth is stationary, like, what else are we wrong about? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's just sad to me. It's sad, and it's unnecessary for us to be at each other's throats and calling each other names and getting all worked up over something that is, at the end of the day, I get it. People get passionate about this. They want to feel like they understand reality properly, and then you'll see something like this, with the water bottle falling, that makes you raise an eyebrow. And if you're not careful, something like that can get away with your imagination, man. But like, in my opinion, that's all this is. It's in your imagination. Like, it's quite obvious to me that you've got two different situations. When one thing is falling, the water's falling with the bottle. And in the other situation, you're pushing the bottle where the water's inertia causes it to want to stand still. And so you have the displacement because of that. I mean, it's night and day. It's simple. It's cut and dried. It's not very complicated, in my opinion. And so the accelerometer thing is an interesting side note, but at the end of the day, like, to me, it seems quite simply that is it's the way that the damn thing is set. It's the way that the damn thing is calibrated, is the word that I'm looking for, right? So, man, to each his own. I don't think it's worth getting at each other's throats over this. Yeah, ether, you're with us or against us. So, like, when I say the term ether, I don't mean like in anything to do with infinite space. When I say the ether, I mean like so basically the substrate of reality, the underlying matrix that dictates physical reality, right? So I don't think that you can have physical matter without sort of a divine underlying plan for that. You feel me? So like, if you look at the cymatics, or like they'll play different musical tones underneath the plates and put like crystals on the plate. And depending on the frequency of the tone, you'll get like different sacred geometric patterns that you'll get physical changes in reality based on changes in the audio frequency. And to me, that's very fascinating. And I think that on the larger sort of macro scales, we've got other instances of that sort of thing on a much wider scale, right? So anyway, hopefully I'm making more sense than I'm not making sense. I'm just checking up on the chat up here, you guys. Forgive me if I'm Stuttering, I can't talk and breathe at the same thing. Eric Kopf says the settlers were Gog and Magog. I've never heard that. I thought Gog and Magog had something to do with the Battle of Armageddon, doesn't it? YouTube, Penn Station's my favorite, but they demolished it. Oh, did they? I didn't know that. When did they demolish Penn Station? I guess it's probably been a while, huh? Alex PM says, I find the best proof of a non-heliocentric world would be what is justified by sidereal time. Could you perhaps speak a little on the topic later, the issue with the sun's seasonal location? So yeah, I mean, the whole thing with sidereal time, to me, it was clearly just sort of made up in order to apologize for the fact that we don't see like day and night swapping 12 hours every 6 months. So it actually works out perfectly with the whole sidereal argument. But like, that's why I prefer to talk about the moon based on its phases, because if we humor the heliocentric model, the moon's phase is a very accurate indicator of where the moon should be, according to the ball Earth model, relative to the Earth and the sun. Okay, so when it's full or even near full, so gibbous on either direction, it's going to be opposite the sun on the night side of Earth. And when the moon is no moon or like very slightly crescent moon, it's going to be on the day side. No exceptions. And the fact of the matter is, you know, we see the moon in the sky in places where it shouldn't be all the time. Sure, sometimes the moon appears to be pretty damn close to where it should be, according to the heliocentric model. And even if it did that 364 days out of the year, if you even just have one instance ever where the moon isn't where it should be, according to the model, based on its cycle, its position in the phase cycle, even one example is enough to totally and irreparably destroy the heliocentric theory. It's dead in the water, man. But yeah, sidereal time is Narnia, in my opinion. I mean, sure, logically it makes sense, but I think that it was come up with in order to apologize for that fact that I mentioned. You should have day and night swapping 12 hours every 6 months, but because of that 1 minute difference per day, it mathematically works out just perfectly. So whatever, isn't that just convenient? Will says, introduced to Australia through Mad Max and Crocodile Dundee movies when I was a kid. Yeah, me too, for sure. Mad Max, not so much, because I definitely saw the original Aussie version, but I think the ones that I was watching when I was a kid were the ones that had been dubbed, right? Now, Crocodile Dundee, on the other hand, yes. I was a little dork, so that was one of the movies I liked when I was a kid. I probably wasn't even that damn young when that one came out, but yeah, in America, we don't learn too much about Australian culture or Australian history. And apparently, up until like the 1960s and 1970s, neither did Australians too. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and maybe any of our Australian viewers out there, leave a comment and tell us what you think, because I've never even been to Australia. Okay, so V. Thomas says, Dell doesn't claim flat. He says, refute Dell by going back to him and showing him by experiment if you have one. I mean, to me, it's not necessary. So I'm not making any positive claims. Dell and those guys over there are making positive claims. What I'm saying, their positive claims involves the main premise that the only cause of water in a bottle not showing signs of acceleration is that being stationary. And what I'm saying is their main premise is fallacious because they're comparing apples to oranges. They're comparing an inertial frame to a non-inertial frame and saying that it's apples and apples, and it's not. It's not apples and apples. An inertial frame is not the same thing as a non-inertial frame. I don't need to do an experiment to prove that. It's obvious. It is what it is. It's observable reality, man. It's self-evident. You can drop a water bottle all day long, and you can slide it across the table all day long. It's two different things. And to claim that it's the same thing going on in those two examples is either intellectually dishonest or intellectually obtuse, one or the other. But it's wrong. It's all kinds wrong. It's, in my opinion, it's stupid. I'm not trying to insult anybody, but like the more energy we put into this, like I honestly, I can't believe we're even talking about it. It's kind of embarrassing. And I'm a freaking flat earther, so what does that say? And again, I'm not trying to insult anyone. I'm not trying to fight about this. I'm not going to do any experiments. I understand this. It's basic physics. It's like the falling water. If you lose water or objects, anything but gases, if you lose it, it's going to fall. There is a downward vector. What they're saying isn't evidence because I've been through it ad nauseum. I mean, you get my point. I'm not doing an experiment. It's their positive claim. I just think that they're making fools of themselves. And my name's not going to be attached to that. But the thing is it makes flat earthers in general look stupid. So, you know, I'm more than happy to talk to Del. I've been emailing back and forth with some of his people, and it's just like, honestly, it's not that important to me. Honestly, I think it's something I wish they would stop saying, but you know, he's a grown man. It's a free country. People can do what they want. But I will say I disagree, and I've already said why I know that their position is wrong. And I believe it would be intellectually dishonest for anyone to claim that those two scenarios are the same, because they're not. They're not. Water has inertia. Water is affected by the downward vector. What goes up must come down. Water is affected by that. So it's that simple. Okay. YouTube says, if that was the case, everything would be weightless. It would need the acceleration. The centrifuge thing makes more sense because that doesn't need Earth to be rising. But when we're on the inside of something, rotating again. I assume Del was claiming an upwards acceleration, not to straw man him, but because acceleration would be needed. If he's not claiming acceleration, nothing would have any weight. Oh, I was reading those backwards. I think I was reading those backwards. But yeah, so I get it. So right, YouTube, exactly. And I guess it probably makes me seem ignorant that I don't know what they're claiming causes acceleration if the Earth is just supposed to be moving up at a fixed rate. But I don't need to know what they claim causes it. It's sort of irrelevant. Because their main premise is fallacious, right? But no, he's not talking about upwards acceleration. He's talking about 9.8 meters per second, full stop, not an acceleration. Thomas F.E. Grahn says, but rising objects stop in its rising. Sinking objects stop sinking when the bottle is let go of while in midair. Okay, so he's saying rising objects stop in its rising. Sinking objects stop sinking when the bottle is let go of in midair. I mean, so what? So what? It's still not standing still. It's housed in that medium, and the water is. Take the top off of that thing, right? And you're in a different situation because the lid's on. It's a non-inertial frame. Everything's moving at the same speed, so it's behaving just as if it's stationary. it's behaving exactly as if it's stationary, okay? But it's not the same thing as sliding it across the counter, because that is an inertial frame, because the water wants to remain at rest when you slide the container. It's two different things. That's all I'm saying. They're trying to say that it's apples and apples, and it's not. It's apples and oranges. It really is. It's as simple as that. V. Thomas said, Dell has only attacked the ones giving him abuse. No, I'm not saying he's attacked me. I'm not saying anyone's attacking anyone. I'm not attacking anyone. I am disagreeing, okay? And we're all free to do that, right? But at the same time, I've heard it said that anyone who doesn't agree with what they're saying is brainwashed, and we're basically, marching to a tune. No, I mean, frankly, I'm a free thinker. I draw my own conclusions. Sure, it can be. We can all tend to sort of follow the leader sometimes, but at the end of the day, it would have been very easy for me to totally ignore what they're saying and just continue thinking that it's stupid. But I didn't. Like, I've actually looked into this. I've thought about it. I've given it my due diligence, and to me, it's very obvious. Like, there isn't a question in my mind about it. But for someone else to say that I'm like, being disingenuous, or that I'm following the leader, repeating a mantra or whatever the case is. No, I mean, Earth is stationary, and I say that a lot. But if I were to find evidence this instant that the Earth was in motion of any sort, then I'm not married to the concept of it being stationary. I'm married to the truth. That's really all I'm concerned with. And yeah, YouTube, love you, brother. DJ Slim says level and stationary. Yeah, indeed. God claims flat. Yeah, I think so too. Fazo says there is no downward vector. Okay. So when you drop a brick, it's going to fall on your foot. If you lose a helium balloon, it's going to raise in altitude. Same thing with a hot air balloon. So there is a downward vector for certain things like liquids and objects. However, if you spin up like a gyroscopic weight, that changes. So spinning something gyroscopically does seem to alter that narrative just a bit. So there are gray areas in what goes up must come down. You've got helium and lighter than air gases. You've got hotter than air gases wanting to rise. You've got spinning gyroscopic weights not really obeying the laws of physics. Like, that's what helicopters use. But the thing is we do have a downward vector for some things. To claim that we do not have a downward vector for some things, to me, is madness. And no, I'm not saying gas go down, gas go boom, boom. That's not what I'm saying. That's the Globbers that do that, okay? Fluffy THC says, our mission of the physical plane realm, which we navigate, is exactly that. Physical plane, yeah. Richie says, all buoyancy and density stop in free fall. Why? All density and buoyancy stop in free fall. I mean, you could probably do tests to determine that, I reckon. Why? I haven't thought about it much, man. Honestly, I haven't thought about it enough to try to explain it. But again, I don't think I'm the one making positive claims here. So I guess what? So all buoyancy and density stops in free fall. Therefore, there is no free fall. Again, I would be careful to make those sorts of exclusive claims, like, because there's probably a rational explanation for it. And, I guess if I were to really delve into that and try to experiment with what is causing that, we could probably come up with something. But it's not that important to me. It's honestly not. DJ Slims electromagnetism, buoyancy, and density. Right. Yeah. So that's the other thing. So it kind of ties in, dovetails nicely with the whole free energy thing, right? So the Tartarian Empire, this worldwide high-tech civilization that definitely existed at some point in the past, that we're tapping into the natural energies created by the dielectric plane Earth. That's measurable. You have an electric potential that increases with altitude, right? So the higher up you go, the more not only kinetic energy is there, but the more static electric potential there is because of the electric differential between the high altitude and the ground. Okay. So that, that's what Tesla towers were all about. And that measurable amount of basically kinetic energy or static electric potential is 100 volts per meter. And I find that very interesting. And it makes me think that because of course, like the metrics that we use to measure electric charges and such are arbitrary, right? So like you could have a volt be anything, but it just lines up nicely that with elevation, you have 100 volts per meter of increased static electric potential. Okay. And so that's not an accident, I don't think. And it seems possible that the metric of a volt was delineated at its current calibration so that it would be a nice and easy 100 volts per meter of increased altitude, right? It's free energy, baby. It's very important. And, when, according to the historical narrative, when Tesla, again, when he wanted to roll this out freely and put up these pyramid-inspired Tesla towers everywhere in order to provide wireless free energy for everyone for free, he was blackballed. They didn't let it happen. And I think that's probably one of the many reasons why they've decided not to teach us all about electrical engineering and electrical circuitry, and certainly not free energy stuff in school. Like, wouldn't it make sense? You would think that in the modern society that we have, they would teach us things like electrical engineering in high school, right? As like a prerequisite. Like, I don't know. I think that it would definitely be better than teaching us about the spinning ball Earth and gravity, and that's for damn sure. I don't know, maybe I'm just tripping, man, but it seems to me like practical skills would be way more valuable to the student in their life than some of the nonsense that they teach us in the regular curriculum, in my opinion. Fazo says, just like saying what causes the leftward vector. Well, I don't know, maybe I'm reading you wrong, but what leftward vector? If you drop a brick, it doesn't fall to the left, it falls down, right? So there is a downward vector for bricks. There's not a downward vector for helium balloons, but I don't think that has anything to do with gravity. It doesn't have anything to do with what? Like, I don't understand. What do you say? Maybe I'm reading you wrong there. But yeah, DJ Sims, electromagnetism, buoyancy, and density for sure. I totally agree. Richie says, if you drop a brick in a bucket of oil and let it go, it will stop sinking through the oil while falling. Right, okay, that's interesting. I mean, that's definitely interesting. What does it prove? I mean, I guess you could construe that. You could interpret that data as a lot of things. I haven't looked into it enough, haven't done experiments with it enough to rule on that either way. But at the same time, I don't think that's enough to say that it proves the Earth is raising upwards at 9.8 meters. I think one of the issues that I had just understanding what exactly it was that, this camp is talking about with the whole upward earth thing was I couldn't find any concise, like, explanatory videos that was like 10 or 15 minutes that had all of the evidence sort of presented in a concise fashion. I'm not dogging anybody. I just couldn't find anything like that. And so it took several weeks email back and forth with a couple different people to fully understand, like, why are they so adamant about this? And even like going around making enemies online about it. Like, I don't understand. I don't get it. But now that I do get it, I guess I could probably do a full length video about it. I just, like, honestly, I'd rather spend my time doing something else. Like, it isn't that big of a deal to me. I'm not really in the business of debunking flat earthers. But if it takes me doing something like that to ultimately to get them to stop making fools of everybody with this, maybe I would. I mean, I know I sound like such an asshole when I say this stuff, man, but honestly, like, it's ridiculous to me. And they're the ones really going around, basically, you're either with us or against us. You know what I mean? Like, I can't stand that shit. When somebody's like, you're either with me or against me, unless we're like going to fight Dracula or something, then I can't, I don't get on board with that shit, man. Like, I think that there's nuances in pretty much everything, especially when it comes to this topic here, right? You know what I mean? Earth is negative and positive is attracted to it. So I said it backwards, right? But you know what I meant. You knew what I meant, smartass. Yeah, I always dyslexify things, but like, I really want to do the Tesla towers, man. I bet you if we got together with a couple electrical engineers that understand the concepts and just watch that damn video where they did it on, I think it was a History Channel documentary series. It was called The Tesla Files. In like the second or third episode of it, they actually put up two, small size Tesla towers, and they were powering a speedboat, a little remote control boat with it, straight from the ether. They did it. And I want to learn how to do that. And I agree with the comment. So looping fully all the way back to that, I agree with the proposition that the downward vector for falling objects has to do with this electric potential increasing with altitude. I think that there's definitely something to that. So the dielectric plane of inertia is what's causing the downward tendency for dense physical objects to fall, right? Simple, but it makes sense. At least it does to me. I think it makes perfect sense. Richie says, Rune Dragon says, static electric determines downward direction. Right, yeah, agree, totally agree. I think that's is what it is. But like, all you need is a tendency, right? You just need the basic tendency for down to be down, right? We'll say it that way. You don't need the 9.8 meters per second squared acceleration of gravity, because you have the atmos plane behaving like with pressure as well, right? So what an amazing world that we do have, though, isn't it? Like, there is so much mystery. There's so much to discuss, so much to discover. Like, man, I really wish that I could live to see the day where truth and righteousness was put on a pedestal, as opposed to mammon and, the foolish wisdom of mankind. It's folly in the eyes of God, as the good book says, right? No, I wished I could live to see the day where, like, we get rid of NASA, we take that budget and put it towards actual exploration. I mean, could you imagine homesteading in the Iron Republic? Wouldn't that be awesome? That would be awesome. Every 3 feet up from the negative Earth is positive 100 volts, Rune Dragon. Right, 100 volts per meter. That's what I said. And again, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think it's a coincidence that it is such a nice round figure, 100 volts per meter. I mean, it could be that the volt was not so arbitrary in determining its metric after all, right? V. Thomas says, type 4, if you think everyone should try inverting gravity. What's gravity with a B? I don't know what that is. Fluffy THC says, George Carlin said it best, just smart enough to poke buttons. V. Thomas says, George Carlin said it best, when does the government go? Yeah. Sorry, I'm just reading through y'all's comments here. Homesteading there would be awesome. Yeah, I agree. Okay. Well, I think that pretty much covers everything I wanted to talk about, you guys. Definitely prayers go up for Palestine. You know, I can't imagine going through that with the children. So I pray that the Most High works miracles for the children and for the innocent people in open and in secret. And just pray that the leaders in charge of those wars over there soften their hearts and give peace a chance, man. So yeah, Shawnee B, sorry I missed you, man. Yeah, I'm about to wrap this up. If anybody would like to help me survive another week, links are down below for PayPal, Patreon, all that. Could sure use your help. We're screwed. Hopefully we'll be out of this situation soon, but I don't know how we're gonna do it. Thank y'all very much for your help, though. It does mean a lot to me. Patreon supporters and all you guys, love you very much. New content coming soon, so be on the lookout for that. Yeah, so sad. Oh man, Fluffy THC, V Thomas. All right, love you guys very much, and I will see you very soon. Bye. Come on, baby. Yeah.